So let's talk about something that's on a lot of our minds. Should we ditch our training zones? We're going to dive into a totally new way of thinking about fitness today, one that gets us away from obsessing over rigid numbers and more into an approach that's, well, a lot more human. And doesn't this just hit the nail on the head? I mean, if you've ever felt completely buried under all the data, all the zones, and the thresholds you're supposed to be tracking, you are definitely not alone. This quote just perfectly captures how complicated we've made something that should be beautifully simple, just moving.
All right, so that tees up our first big idea perfectly, what we're calling the tyranny of numbers. We're going to take a hard look at how this obsession with data might actually be built on a pretty shaky foundation, a flawed idea of how our bodies really work.
Zone 2, HIT, LIS, lactate thresholds, you hear these terms thrown around all the time, right? They're presented like these exact scientific rules for getting in shape. But the problem is, this kind of advice basically treats the human body like it's a simple machine, which, as you're about to see, it absolutely is not. And that brings us to the real heart of this whole thing, this fundamental clash between two big ideas, viewing your body as a machine versus seeing it as a complex, living ecosystem.
Okay, check this out, because this is where it gets really interesting. For like 300 years, we've been stuck in this clockwork view. You know, the body is a predictable machine, and when you get sick, it's just a broken part you need to fix. But then, complexity science comes along with a totally different story, the complexity view. In this version, your body is this dynamic, ever-changing ecosystem. It's not about simple rules, it's about self-organization and constant adaptation. This is a huge shift in thinking.
Okay, so that's the theory, but how can we actually see this in our own bodies? In this next part, we're going to go looking for the fingerprint of complexity to really understand why that old machine model just doesn't cut it. Which leads us to the big question for anyone who's ever been glued to their heart rate monitor. Are those training zones, are they even real? Are there these sharp lines in the sand between zone 1 and zone 2?
Well, if you look at the actual data, the answer is a pretty resounding nope. Those neat little boundaries, they just don't exist. Your lactate levels don't just suddenly spike at some magic number. Your heart rate doesn't fall off a cliff. What really happens is that all these signals change gradually along these really smooth curves. The idea of a sharp boundary, it's a useful myth maybe, but it's not biological reality.
And this is that fingerprint of complexity we were talking about. Instead of neat bell curves, our real-world data looks a lot messier. And here's the most important takeaway from all this. Your metabolic state isn't one single number. It's a probabilistic range. You don't have to be exactly at 135 beats per minute. You just need to be in the right neighborhood, inhabiting a broad, productive zone of effort.
Okay, so if the old way of thinking is broken, what do we do instead? This brings us to a really cool practical strategy that comes straight out of this new ecosystem mindset, the anti-fragile barbell strategy. But first, we need to understand this key idea, antifragility. So think about it like this. A fragile thing, like a glass, shatters under stress. A robust thing, like a rock, just endures it. But an anti-fragile system, and this is what our bodies are, it actually gets stronger from stress and chaos, as long as it's the right dose. Stress is literally the fuel for growth. So how do we put this to work? With the barbell strategy. And it's so beautifully simple. Picture a barbell, right? Most of your time, that's the big heavy end of the barbell, is spent doing easy, low-intensity stuff. Then you add a tiny amount, the other end of the barbell, of super short, super intense efforts. And the most important part? You stay out of that medium-hard gray zone in the middle, because that's where you just get tired without actually getting better. And here's the best part. Seriously, this whole approach frees you from being a slave to the numbers. It's not about hitting an exact target. It's about the shape of your training over time. You are literally sculpting the distribution of your effort to give your body that mix of stress and recovery it needs to thrive. So what does this actually look like day to day? Well, that brings us to what the source material calls real-world physical training. Now, this is where it gets fun. Think about things that naturally create that barbell effect. Hiking up a mountain with a backpack. You've got lots of slow, steady walking broken up by these killer steep climbs. Or mountain biking, boxing, even something like intense dancing. These activities give you this rich, varied mix of physical stress that a steady jog on a treadmill just can't compete with. So let's bring this all home. What's the real goal here? It's about this incredible new idea of shaping your own physiology.
This right here is the big mental shift. You have to stop acting like you're the mechanic for your body machine, constantly tweaking the dials.
Instead, you start to work with it. You collaborate with this amazing living ecosystem that is your body. You stop chasing numbers, and you start creating the conditions for it to get stronger on its own.
And so we're left with this really empowering question. What if the whole point of training isn't about hitting some magic number? What if it's about intentionally shaping the entire landscape of your own biology? Creating a system that's flexible, that's resilient, and that can actually grow stronger from the challenges life throws at it. The second you start thinking that way, everything changes. It's a much more exciting and honestly a much more fun way to think about being fit.